All right, good afternoon and welcome. This is your Mountain State Update for the 4th of June, 2017. Your Sunday political sermon right here on WTSQ LP in Charleston. I'm John Cantees, and today I'm joined by the man, the myth, the public news correspondent, Dan Hyman, and candidate for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Senate, Paula Swearengin. And first of all, before we go into the interview with Paula Swearengin, I want to go ahead and just point out, I want to make the obvious even more obvious, which is that WTSQ does not endorse any candidate for any race ever, never has, never will. I've reached out to both candidates for this nomination, and hopefully we have them both on, and we can give them both an interview and give them both time on the show.
If Joe Manchin is listening and if Evan Jenkins is listening, come on the show and we'll ask you questions too.
I mean, that's the deal, right? Everybody gets on if they want to come on. I can't make them come on, but I can give everybody the chance to, and that's all I can do.
That's what we do.
All right, so how's everything going today? I'm glad to have you here. How are you?
Good afternoon. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm excited to have you on here because you're a part of this movement that I've been watching very closely that seems to have always kind of been there, but it's getting a lot of life and it's getting a lot of energy in it lately since the Trump loss. And it's sort of feeding off of this division within the Democratic Party right now, which is the brand new Congress, the Justice Democrats, and it's that the Democrats, these people are tired of doing this Bill Clinton strategy of, well, let's be a little bit right here. Let's be a little bit right here. Maybe we can not worry about abortion rights anymore, and we can compromise on this and compromise on that. And you can point to some areas where maybe that's worked, but now it doesn't seem to be working. And that's the mentality that I'm seeing, and these groups are behind you. Do you consider yourself a part of that movement, or where do you consider your place is in this primary right now?
My place is, I'm a single mom. I've been working for years fighting for clean water, for clean air for my kids, fighting for my neighbors, my family, my friends, wanting them to have prosperity, good jobs, good sustainable jobs.
Right.
I feel like every other Democrat, I think, progressive Democrat, I don't really like the labels, but this movement is about people all over America tired of the Democratic Party not giving us the progressive platform that they promised us. But also, it's to focus on maybe a post-partisan effort, because Democrat or Republican, we have a lot of the same morals and issues, but it seems like people are so divided with the two-party system. I would like to see people vote more for the issues as opposed to the label.
Be more policy-oriented.
Right.
Right.
Because people are dying in West Virginia. We're begging, people are begging for clean water. Jim Justice, my Democratic governor, is blowing up mountains 3 miles from my house and putting silica dust in my kids' lungs. That was one of my big awakenings with the Democratic Party, is because they're just as bad as their leaders not to be serving people in communities. It's all money-based, and people are bought off to invest in their demise.
Tell us a little bit about your background. You said you obviously have an activist background. You're working on environmental issues, but who are you personally? You sound like you're from West Virginia. Were you born and bred here? And
yeah, I was born here. Most of my family were in coal mining. My dad.
What part of the state?
I was born in Mullins, West Virginia.
In Mullins.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
My dad, he passed away at 54 years old with cancer. My grandpa spent 45 years in the coal mines and suffocated to death. Most of my uncles have black lung. They suffocate. My stepdad, he's got heart disease. That's my big disappointment with the singular industry-based economy and the praises of coal. Mm-hmm. I've lived long enough to see the progression and regression. I've watched my neighbors go hungry. I tasted polluted water when I was a little girl. I lived in a community called Iroquois. It was the Sweeney watershed. We used to bathe and drink water that was orange. It had a blue and purple film. My stepdad got laid off in the coal mines. I thought my hair was red until I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
That's a disgrace.
Yeah.
We shouldn't have to.
That's third world.
Tell us about your professional history. What do you do for a living, and what have you done?
I am an accounting clerk for a small business. I'm an ordinary individual. I'm not a polished.
Is that what you've always done?
Until my divorce, yes. I was I stayed at home most of the time until my divorce in 2005.
Right.
And then I started back into the workforce. I'm just a single struggling mom like most women in my position in the coal fields.
Right.
So you've told us a little bit about your what issues have motivated you. Talk a little bit about the process you went through in deciding to run, because this is a fairly high office. And I mean, oftentimes I've heard reporters say, I remember actually putting this question to John Racy, for example, who was running for Senate, and I said, why not start at House of Delegates and work your way up? Why not start at the local school board or the local county commission? I can understand why people wouldn't necessarily want to run for county commission in some parts of southern West Virginia. That's a jungle down there. But why go for senator? Talk us through that process.
Well, when I moved back here, it was approximately 2001. Like I said, after my stepdad got laid off in the coal mines. I was always proud of my coal heritage. Then I started seeing my neighbors' kids get cancer. And like I said, I buried most of my family. And I said, it's boom and bust. It's feast or famine. And so I realized that this industry was not serving us. And so I became an activist. I'm not an environmental activist. I've been a mom that's been begging for clean water and clean air.
Community activist sometimes.
And begging for prosperity in my communities. Because, like he said, it's third world country conditions. And I have spent many, many years begging, pleading, and crying, and going all over the country and having taken all this time away from my children, trying to work every day and then working the night too, go off on the weekends. I miss so much time with my kids begging for basic human rights. And when Jim
But you should not have to beg for.
Right.
There shouldn't be something you have to ask for. You shouldn't have to ask your senator for clean water in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where you're coming from.
And I realized my awakening was Jim Justice. I had never been so disheartened and mad. I mean, Don Blankenship's out of jail now. What are we going to do? We're going to put him in as our next governor? I mean, they're killing people.
Right.
And our leadership is catering to them. And I think it's past time, not only in West Virginia, but for Americans to take the seats back from these people that are invested in our demise. This nation was built by the people, for the people, and I think it's time for us to make decisions for ourselves. Corporate money should not be making decisions about our children's future. We shouldn't be making those decisions. This is our government. We need public servants.
Which is a part of your campaign that you want to underline. You're not taking corporate money.
Right.
You're not taking money from gas companies and oil companies.
Right.
And coal companies.
Right.
These are not your people. You do not represent them. You're not taking money from them. You're taking money from individuals.
Right.
And that's where you stand on that.
Right. Brand New Congress is not a super PAC. It's a federal PAC. We can't even take a donation over $5,000 from an individual.
Good.
And this is what it is. It's about a movement. It's about us investing in our own campaigns and telling them we don't want their dirty money no more, and our children's future is not for sale.
So why Senate? Why Senate? Why not run? I mean, we're going to have, Jenkins is, if he's going to run against Manchin, then we'll have an open seat in the 3rd District, in the southern West Virginia. Why run for Senate?
When Evan Jenkins took Nikki Jo Rahall's seat, and you've seen all the money that the Koch brothers put into him, it scared the daylights out of me. And then you look at Joe Manchin and you look at Evan Jenkins, they have the same funders. And so I think that we need a true representative in the Senate. And I hope through my voice, people need to know that Brand New Congress is ready to support other people to take those 4 congressional seats too. We need a movement in West Virginia.
Yep, I agree. Now, in a minute after this interview, we're going to talk about some bigger topics that are going on the national level and the international level. And one of those is going to be that the U.S. pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord. And we'll get your take on it in a little bit, but I want to just give you a moment to just maybe talk about where do you think we need to go forward with energy, not just as a country, because if you're a senator, you're making decisions that impact the entire planet. You're not just affecting West Virginia anymore, but you're going to come from this perspective where you've seen what you've seen in West Virginia, and I'm wondering where that perspective is going to lead you if you were to get to that much larger stage.
I know
For example, are you in favor of natural gas? To that kind of an incremental step. Natural gas is where we need to go, or nuclear, or are you thinking more solar and wind? I mean, what direction do you think your experience is going to take you?
I think West Virginia deserves a stable and clean economic infrastructure for our future, and I think that it's past time to get rid of the fossil fuels and the dinosaurs that are killing us.
So you're not in favor of natural gas? You don't
absolutely
think?
not.
Okay.
I mean, look at people in the North. I mean, the pitch is with Evan Jenkins and Joe Manchin right now is coal, 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 and jobs, jobs, jobs.
Right.
And they're not even mentioning people in the North. I mean, the Southern District is not the only part of this state. The people in the North are having to deal with fracking too. So that's their plan B is to poison their water and bring the Marcellus Shale into southern West Virginia. Absolutely not. I mean, the wind blows and the sun shines in West Virginia, and we need to bring sunshine back to our children's lives. We can manufacture solar and wind here, and we can put wind here. We can invest in agriculture. There's lots of things. 20 years ago, they were high-wage manufacturing jobs and coal jobs, and it's evolved into low-service wage jobs. It's been proven that those industries are not supporting our communities and our economy anymore. So we need to invest in a stable economic future and a diverse economic future. West Virginia deserves that. We have the Industrial Revolution was built on the backs of coal miners, their families, and surrounding communities. This state has powered this nation with our blood, and it's time for us to invest in ourselves and invest in our future. And as a senator, I stand with Americans, everybody across America, and even in Flint, Michigan, where those people are being poisoned. It's cultural genocide, and it's unacceptable. This is supposed to be a free nation. Why should we compromise the environment and our health for jobs? It's ridiculous.
Right.
Other countries
jobs
have
that
advanced.
Even if you have the job, it's a dangerous, toxic job. If you're referring to coal mining anyway.
Well, coal mining, fracking.
I mean, it's
unacceptable.
Like we're fighting for jobs, but then what is this job that we're fighting so hard for? This is a dangerous, toxic job that can go away at any moment. I mean,
So
it's like why fight so hard?
On this show, we've often taken the coal industry to task, and we've criticized the coal industry for the way that they have really successfully manipulated the people of West Virginia. I mean, we see that there are, the number of mining jobs has declined continuously for years, and now there are actually more nurses in West Virginia than there are coal miners, and yet they have managed through a very intelligent use of their public relations, and they have used the state's let's say cultural connection to coal mining as a way to manipulate the state's politics, and we've criticized them for this. The Friends of Coal and the way that they've manipulated the state government, but the thing is that they've done that successfully, right? How do you get past the argument that you have to support that industry to win political office in West Virginia?
It's not the same as attacking anything else. It's like a cultural thing at this point in West Virginia. Yeah. It's like attacking Santa Claus. Like, how do you
But
do
it's
that?
not. But it's a cultural thing. But it's a successful cultural thing. I mean, it's like how do we finally transcend that? How do we diversify the economy? How do we get people to actually broadly accept that, rather than if you go out there and you support, let's say, a carbon tax or cap and trade in West Virginia, they're going to say, you're raising my taxes to pay for an environmental policy set in Paris, to paraphrase our president. What do you say to that? What do you say to someone who says, you're taking away my jobs, my history, in order to support a tax on my way of life that's really only going to benefit Europeans and Chinese?
West Virginia people have been lied to. Donald Trump lied to them when they said they was going to bring jobs back. If we don't start advancing, then there's not going to be no future here. And our leaders are not even talking about it. And there's a clear difference in being a friend to a coal miner and being a friend to the coal industry. And what they have done, and they have been very strategic with their propaganda. I'm a coal miner's daughter. You know, my family has sacrificed just as much blood to power this nation, but yet my leaders are going to tell their workforce that I'm their enemy, and I'm not. There's not a person hardly in West Virginia that is not connected to the coal industry, but also most of our ancestors settled here before the coal industry did. And also, with this divide, you know, Appalachians are hospitable. You know, we neighbor helping neighbor, and that's been going on for generations. And it's desperation. They've put us in a desperate position. And I'm standing up and saying, hey, I'm a coal miner's daughter, and I am your friend. You know, my family sacrificed just as much. And people are desperate to feed their children, and children are, you know, and their children are going hungry. And it's a desperate state of being in West Virginia, and it's unacceptable. And if we don't unite and conquer that divide, our children are not going to have anything to look forward to.
So you think that those roots are going to be maybe enough to help what Dan is saying, to maybe overcome that cultural understanding that coal is just good and don't question it. If you question it, then you're a crazy person. Yeah. Like, you think, you coming from where you've come from, I mean, it seems logical to me that you're in the perfect place to be pro-coal. You know, you have the background that you would think would lead anyone to be pro-coal. You've been involved in it forever. The fact that you're not says a lot about coal, I would think. So that's essentially what you're saying.
It says a lot about the coal industry. And if you look at the history of West Virginia and you look at the labor struggles that our ancestors fought and won, you know, this generation has failed because we have fallen short to listen to that propaganda and not fight back. I mean, this ain't the days of company script and company housing and having to, you know, use their money to shop at their company store.
Right.
They still own a lot of our land here, and they still own us. And why should we have to be bought and paid for? And why should we power this nation on our backs and not see no return in their communities? We're one of the sickest and poorest states in the nation. But they've been trillions of dollars of money for coal go out of West Virginia.
All that money leaves, right?
It leaves.
It doesn't.
We don't see no kickback in our communities. And why should we have to sacrifice?
If we did, I maybe wouldn't feel the way I do if we did benefit from it in some major economic way. But we don't. Right, like you're saying, it generates a lot of money, but then it goes away.
And Donald Trump. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was. Go ahead. I mean, you're the guest here, so you talk first.
You know, Donald Trump promised jobs. Where are they? I think I read the other day, and I hope I'm not misquoting, maybe the jobs have increased by 9%. And that's just a small portion of our workforce.
I mean, we're getting the same jobs that we were getting under Obama. It's around 100,000 or so a month, right? I mean, it's the trajectory that Obama put us on.
Oh, you mean the overall job growth?
Yeah. Or are you talking about West Virginia specifically?
West Virginia, I mean, if you're talking about the coal industry, I mean, that's, you know,
oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to be interested to see how Trump's supporters react when it becomes clear that, you know, these coal jobs are not coming back. Because maybe there'll be some bump in the industry, and we may see a few, you know, but we're not going to see the kind of, I mean, he promised a lot to the people of West Virginia. He promised a lot to the people of Appalachia.
Right.
And it's going to be interesting to see how the voters react when that doesn't happen.
Right. I mean, it's going to take someone to point that out.
Yeah.
You know, he can't just not perform. You have to have people pointing it out. That's why we exist.
So let me ask you.
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
Well, I was going to ask you this. I mean, I find it interesting, you know, as a political observer. I've been watching the United Mine Workers position on this stuff for a long time, and they will come out in favor, for example, of mountaintop removal mining because it's more, you know, it's union jobs. And they will side with you know, I don't know if they endorsed Clinton this last time around. I think they endorsed Obama, and the Republicans really beat them over the head with it. And that, you know, that was part of the context for the number of Republicans who have won office here. Is that the Democratic Party has been, you know, they hung the carbon pollution issue, you know, and cap and trade and global warming issue around the Democratic Party's head, and then they used that national Democratic position to really hurt Democrats running for office here. So, I mean, have you talked to the union, and how do you tell the you're actually saying that the Democratic Party isn't progressive enough, but the Republicans have beaten the Democratic Party here in the state for being too aggressive on these issues. I mean, how do you get past that?
I don't even know why the Republican Party's saying that. I mean, because
That's a weird thing to say about the Democrats in this state.
Well, but it's true. I mean, if you watch the politics, they've certainly used that attack. I mean, they criticize every Democrat who runs for office above, I don't know, let's say, maybe House of Delegates. It's probably, beyond that, and they probably use it at the House of Delegates level too. They say, this person is from the party of Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton, and Hillary Clinton is, said to have said, we're going to put a lot of coal miners out of work. Now, of course, that's a misquote. It was, quoted out of context from what she actually said. But how do you, have you spoken to the union? Have you gotten anywhere with the UMWA? And how do you get past that accusation that the Democratic Party is against the working people of West Virginia?
I question what the union has become. It's not my grandpa's union anymore. With mountaintop removal, mechanization has taken people's jobs. And the union used to stand up for the safety of coal miners and the safety of their families and people in the communities. And I'm astounded that the UMWA will stand up and say they support mountaintop removal, because that's actually dynamite has taken people's jobs. And with their positions, it's just not the same. Back in the 80s, when a lot of these men got laid off, like my stepdad did, a lot of these scab mines, non-union mines, came in and started taking people's jobs and putting them in unsafe working conditions. And that's when they started destroying our communities and blowing people's houses off their foundation and poisoning their water. And then, the UMWA has been, they've been against environmental protections. So that's not protecting the UMWA miners. Joe Manchin recently, he's got a lot of praise for the Miners Protection Act. But what's happened is nobody's mentioning the bankruptcies and the bailouts that the coal industry received, and they're going on with business while it was an attack on our elderly and people, the older miners that were promised pensions and health care for their life. And then it's going to go back on the backs of taxpayers through the Reclaim Act. And the coal industry is still going to dig that coal. Now they're going to destroy our water more. And what about the future coal miners? What about them? Where's their health care, and where's their pensions, and where's their protections? The pensions have still not been resolved for the UMWA miners.
That's one of Manchin's things that people seem to like about him. He gets votes from the right. He gets votes from all over the spectrum here in the state. But the thing that I'm hearing a lot is that people say that Joe Manchin fights for our pensions, he fights for our health care, he fights for our safety, he's out there fighting for the coal miner. I've looked into it. Seems to be somewhat true. I don't see any glaring instances where he didn't fight for coal miner safety and pensions. But is that something that you feel like you can be the standard bearer in terms of that, like he has been able to be? You feel like you could fill those shoes?
Lunch pail Democrat,
right?
Like they talk about the conservative Democrat, traditionally as a welfare check in one hand and a bomb in the other. Is the way I've heard it described.
And I feel like a lot of these miners, especially the older ones that are now finding they're on hard times and they're having trouble finding work, and they're having trouble finding work for the kids that they thought was going to be there. And they didn't go to college, so they're like really screwed because they depended on this. When they hear a progressive talking about, I know you don't like labels, but when they hear someone talking about, well, we need to transition to this new type of energy. We need to get over coal. We need to move on. We need to get over it. When they hear someone talking about that, what they hear, I think, is that, well, whatever pension, whatever health care, whatever chance I had at a future, this person doesn't care about that. This person wants that to go away. So what seems to me what needs to be done is there needs to be a logical bridge between what that was, what they thought they were going to get, and what you're proposing. That's the job, really, right? That's the big cultural job, I think, that you have. And I'm curious to see, how well you're doing it, but do you think you could do that?
The men in their 60s that work in coal mining, they're not going to know anything else. I mean, that's all they know.
Right.
But you talk to the most of the people in the workforce that has worked for coal mining, and they've lived that long, and they know what impact it has on their health. They do not want their children to inherit that legacy. And what you hear from most of the people in my communities, in my areas, they do want alternatives.
Right.
And they do
They're
want a
not
different
anti-green jobs.
They're not anti-jobs, period.
Right.
You know, they want jobs, but they're just not here and it's not going to happen overnight. If we got rid of coal mining tomorrow, people would starve, and people are starving already.
Right.
But what we're not seeing is the market's down, and it's going to continue to be down. There's not going to be this magic thing that happens, and the coal industry is going to come back. But none of our leadership is talking to us about those alternatives. I mean, look at the depopulation in West Virginia and how many people have had to leave because they don't have the work opportunities. Mm-hmm. It's unfair. We need to bring our families back home.
And keep the ones that
and
are
keep
here
them here
still.
And give them a reason to stay.
Well, that's a good point for something I wanted. That brings into something I wanted to bring up, which is, I think one of the jobs for the Democratic Party, the Democratic nominee, progressives, anybody really outside of the Republican Party now, and maybe even Republicans will see the light and come along with this. We'll see. I mean, I'm not holding my breath, but is to provide that economic basis that we're talking about outside of the coal industry. I mean, where do we go to put people to work?
We invest in different infrastructures, green technologies, biofuel, agriculture, even hemp. I mean, why can't that's something that will actually grow on a mountaintop removal site. They're not fit for a rattlesnake, but hemp will grow on a mountaintop removal site. How come we're not using that abandoned land for something? If we can use it, we need to. We need to build manufacturing jobs. We need to cater to small businesses.
Any export.
West Virginia's not welcoming to small businesses, and they pay way too much for taxes.
How do we do that? Because I mean, I think you're right, and I think a lot of people have said that either intentionally or unintentionally, the coal industry has discouraged the development of other kinds of businesses. The big coal companies have really squashed all the competition. And we here in West Virginia have let them do that. We've sort of bought into that. How do we get past that? I mean, you can cite specific examples, right? And I think that actually something that Jim Justice is doing that's smart is investing in new kinds of agricultural products and new ways of getting that to market. And then you see individual cases, like, for example, I saw that there was a surface mining company in Kentucky that once they had sort of exhausted the coal after they'd, blown up the mountains and pushed them all into the valleys, and taken the coal out, that they're starting to put solar panels on that mine. And people have said, they have asked them about that, and they said, well, this is not anti-coal. This is just that the coal is gone from that site. So you have, for example, the previous agriculture commissioner was promoting, different products. He put into place a veterans, a fund or a program to help veterans get into agriculture, and some of that's post-mine land use. And how do we do this? Talk mechanisms. Let's talk policy here.
Well, first thing we need to do is get the dirty money out of politics, and we need leadership that will start investing in our future. And I think that we need health care for every West Virginian.
Universal health
every
care.
American.
Single payer.
Yes, we need Medicare for all. What does it say about America, and what does it say about West Virginia that we have some of the sickest people in the nation and sacrifice so much that we cannot provide health care?
Right.
We have to be more welcoming to small business. We also need to invest in education in West Virginia. We need to, educated people, healthier people, investing in the workforce. It's going to build up our economy. And we have to be welcoming to other industries. And like I said, we can have solar and wind, but we can manufacture solar and wind in West Virginia. But we have to open our doors to those kinds of things because we've not, the coal industry has had so much pull that that's what they've wanted, is us to be totally dependent on that one resource. And it's been boom and bust, feast and famine, like I said.
For 100 years, yeah.
For 100 years, and we've not welcomed anything else. And and it's because, you look at the money trail and InterSystems, Joe Manchin and his investments, and let's throw in the opioids too, and his daughter and Mylan. Really, look at what's happened here. The coal industry has been very strategic to take over our economy and our leadership.
Yep.
It's unacceptable, and we have to fight back. If we don't fight back, we are not going to have anything, and that's what's going to conquer that divide, is people have to wake up and realize if we don't fight back, there's no plan B.
Let me ask you a couple things here, and then we'll wrap up the interview. You're in favor of, just to be clear, Medicare for all, single payer, whatever gets us to that point where it's universal.
Yes.
Okay. You're in favor of saving Social Security, not cutting it,
yes.
like we're having some Democrats
yes.
flirting with. Okay. And you're in favor of, obviously, ending the wars?
Yes.
If there were anything to maybe pull us completely out of Iraq, pull us completely out
yes.
of Afghanistan, you would probably be in favor of those?
Yes.
Are you in favor? There's a raising the minimum wage bill that's circulating the House right now. I believe it's to 15. Are you in favor of that? Would you,
yes,
if that were to make its way to the Senate?
Absolutely. I think in
You
West
think
Virginia
15 is enough? I don't even know if 15 is enough. We've been talking about 15 for like 3 years. It's kind of not enough now, I think. But
I don't know. I think that would be a pretty significant bump. That would be nearly
it would, but
doubling.
But a significant bump from where we are now.
Right.
How much?
Well, not to get too technical, but one of the proposals is that once we raise it, then one version of that would index it to inflation after that point.
Right.
So we'll see. We'll see about.
Would you be in favor of that? Would you tying it to inflation after raising it, so we don't have to have this argument every couple years when and have to have people struggling before the federal government realizes, oh, maybe we should throw them a bone.
Right.
Instead of having that argument every couple years, maybe tie it to inflation. Would you be
right.
in favor of that?
No, yes, I totally agree, because if you raise the minimum wage and then the cost of living raises, it's not going to do anybody any good.
Right. That just basically makes sense, doesn't it?
$1 billion question. This is the big one. If you lose and Joe Manchin wins the nomination, would you vote for him?
No.
Who would you vote for?
Mountain Party, it would probably be a protest vote.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, because I can't, I was so aggravated when Jim Justice won as governor. We did have a good candidate, Charlotte Pritt, even though she was with a third party, because Bill Cole was a poor choice too. I'm doing exactly what I'm asking people to do. I'm voting with my conscience. How can we make any change? People say, well, you need a lot of money for this campaign. No, I need votes. Right. I need votes, and people need to start voting for people that's actually going to represent them and be public servants. I will never vote for Evan Jenkins, and I will never vote for Joe Manchin. I will point out at one time, years ago, and I can't even remember who his opponent was, I did vote for Joe Manchin. It seems like he's evolved throughout the years. It's kind of like a surgeon or a doctor that's done things for so many years, they're immune to watching people die and people suffer. It amazes me as many times as I've approached him and tried to talk to him, and I've told him, he talks about his pride with coal miners, but he's not worried about coal miners' daughters and sons and grandchildren dying in the coal fields. He's totally immune to it.
I saw how he talked to you at that town hall. That was unacceptable. I didn't like that at all. I tend to the thing that everyone says was like your inspiration to run for Senate. When he told you to run against me, then you're like, okay, here you are. All right, so Paula Jean. Thanks for coming on, Paula Jean.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Do you prefer Paula Jean or Paula Swearengin?
Most of my family call me Paula Jean. So
Paula Jean it is.
How can, if somebody's interested in your candidacy and finding out more about you, how can they get in touch with you?
PaulaJean2018.com.
All right, you're listening to the Mountain State Update here on WTSQ LP in Charleston. Follow us on Twitter at Mountain State Up and follow us on YouTube. We're going to be right back. We're going to take a little break, and then we're going to get into some current events here for the rest of the show.
WTSQ is brought to you by Blues Barbecue and Catering, specializing in ribs, brisket, wings, sandwiches, and offering 3 different types of barbecue. Located at 1109 Jefferson Road in South Charleston. More information regarding dine-in or catering at facebook.com/bluesbbqwv.
All right, we're back. This is the Mountain State Update with John Canties. I'm John Canties, and we're joined today by Dan Hyman and Paula Jean, the Democratic primary opponent for Joe Manchin in the Democratic nomination for the U.S. Senate.
Little tears for fears for you kids out there.
Got to do it.
Gotta do it.
Erin was just talking on her show about how they went and saw Tears for Fears in Hall & Oates, and she failed to mention that I was there with her. We all went. Me and my girlfriend went down
Well,
there.
she likes this show. Erin's a fan of this show.
Oh,
so
yeah.
I can't complain too much.
Oh, no, Erin's a friend. Okay, so we had yet another attack in the UK, and I want to talk about this for a little bit. This is one of those things that we just have to talk about. We just can't not talk about it. And sometimes, as a listener, you know, when these are becoming so common, it may sound like we're repeating ourselves, but at the same time, too bad, because we have to talk about this kind of stuff. I don't want this to become normal.
Yeah.
You know, and at risk of sounding repetitive, I would rather talk about it anyway because I don't want this to be normalized. The British Prime Minister Theresa May claimed there was, quote, too much tolerance of Islamic extremism in the UK, as she's now vowing to clamp down in the wake of this third terror attack in the UK this year. Dan, what's your take on this? Because we got 7 people dead here, dozens injured. This was a little more of a complicated thing than just a bomb going off.
Yeah.
What's your take on this? And what do you think is going to come of it?
Well, it's interesting because, of course, they have an election going on in the UK now. They're in the middle of they have a very short election window. They declare an election to be in like whatever it is, a couple of months, and then they have, you know, a few weeks of campaigning, and then boom, they have a ballot. It's a very short process compared to the United States. But one of the things that's interesting about that current campaign is that the leftist candidate, the leader of the Labour Party, who most people going into this were saying was unpopular, unelectable, too far left. You know, I'd heard him describe Jeremy Corbyn as looking like a shaved badger in a suit. But the same person who said that also said that Theresa May looked like a paint by number pictures of a nun that had been splashed with gray paint.
Good substantive comments there.
But the thing is that Theresa May went into this election with a huge lead, a 20-point lead the Conservatives had. And that's actually fallen by more than half now. So the Labour Party, which was led by someone who is supposedly unelectable, the sort of left-wing, socialist. He's a democratic socialist. He's sort of been called England's Bernie Sanders, but he's catching up. So the reason I bring that up is because I had been expecting, after the attack in Manchester, and now with this most recent attack with the vehicle attack in London, there was also a vehicle attack in London before this, my political instincts would suggest to me that these would be a boost for Theresa May. Okay. Now, for example, May has struck this kind of vaguely intolerant, anti-immigrant tone in her response to these attacks, which John was pointing to, saying that, you know, we don't have enough, we're too accepting of, Islamic extremists.
Kind of getting into that Le Pen territory.
Yeah,
maybe
little
not
bit.
quite, but maybe.
Well, she's trying to steal UKIP's clothes, as the saying goes. The UK.
No one's tolerant of
independent-
terrorists. You know, it's
Yeah.
like it's such a non-sentence.
But what the interesting thing is that you would think that Corbyn's argument is that some of this is due to English, in that case, UK foreign policy, which is an interesting position. And you would think that would be politically unviable. I think that there's a certain basis in that because the West's foreign policy has created the conditions in which these Islamic extremists develop.
Right.
But you know, this is the kind of thing where you don't actually expect a politician to come out and say it. It apparently has not hurt him, or at least not dramatically
Maybe not
that
yet.
I've seen.
Where do you fall on that, Paula, when it comes to Western policies influencing this and maybe cultivating this?
Yeah,
this type
how
of problem?
do we deal with terrorism? I mean, if you win the Senate, this is something you're going to have to
Sure.
face.
Yeah. Where do you fall on that?
I think the biggest way we can deal with terrorism is being good neighbors to other countries and trying to work with them. It really scares me with this administration, all the enemies that Donald Trump is acquiring throughout this whole process.
We've already seen that they've used him as propaganda once, at least once.
Yes.
Oh yeah, he's probably the poster boy for ISIS recruiting.
Right.
I mean, he's about as bad as it gets.
And you know what we did when we beat Germany in World War II? We learned a lesson after beating them in World War I. We didn't just leave them to be impoverished and angry and fermented. We helped them a little bit, not a lot, but enough so they could heal properly, and then they wouldn't turn into enemies later. Maybe that mentality could be carried over into this.
I mean,
in some form.
The Marshall Plan was a response to the threat of communism. Let's be plain about it.
Well, sure, but that's what it did, though. It helped.
Did. I mean, it was very successful, and it really worked.
Now Germany is an ally and one of the leaders of Europe now.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad that Germany is there because Angela Merkel can turn out to be the international leader that Donald Trump is not. Is not undertaking.
It's her and Macron, basically.
But part of my point, and I don't know whether this is good or bad. I mean, John kind of alluded to this when he said we don't want this to become normal. But my point about Jeremy Corbyn not suffering an electoral poll decline because of the attacks suggests, I've heard some commentators on the BBC who've been watching this, and they say, people, there'll be a little bump, a little blip in the news, but then they go back to what they were thinking before. In other words, people are not letting this terrorize them. Mm-hmm. If you think about the root word of terrorism. Now, is that good or bad?
Change their life.
I'm not sure that's. I don't think it's. I think in some ways it's probably good, and in some ways it's deeply depressing. That could become the new normal, and that people are adapting to it. But then again, it also means that terrorism is not succeeding in its primary goal, which is to shock and
make everyone hide in their basements. For the rest of eternity.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. So I mean, let's talk about that for a minute. I mean, how do we make sure that democracy triumphs over terror without becoming too thick-skinned to really care about what happens?
I think our biggest combat with terrorism, like I said, is keeping...
Put your mic up there a little bit, will you?
I think our biggest combat against terrorism is working with our allies and not creating enemies. I mean, we got to have good forces and join forces. Mm-hmm. There's power in numbers. And if we're burning bridges with other countries, that just makes us more vulnerable to terrorism.
Speaking of burning bridges with other countries, let's move on to that the U.S. has pulled out of the Paris Climate Accord here. And this is not just... Here's the thing. He said it was a bad deal, okay? Like we're doing too much. We're disproportionately involved. The whole point of this was for the U.S. to lead, to come out on top, and be the country that leads the world into this new era that we're going to have to go in. So when you look at the numbers, maybe the U.S. did a little bit more than China here. Maybe the U.S. did a little bit more than India here. But that's what leaders do. They maybe do a little bit more, and they don't complain about it. They do it. They take that leadership role, and they show the other countries how it's done, and then everyone moves forward together. But Donald Trump didn't see it that way. He saw it as simply as a spreadsheet. Who's spending the most money? What? Us? Why is that? Quit doing it. Yeah. And he got out of it. Now, where do you guys fall on this? Because this, I suspect we're probably in agreement on this, but this seems maybe more detrimental than we realize right now to me.
The thing is that most people argue about climate change, and why can't, even if we agree or disagree, what's wrong with the clean environment?
That's what I'm saying.
And this is economic growth. We're talking about bringing change to America, especially West Virginia. And then look who supported it last week: Joe Manchin, Evan Jenkins, Shelley Moore Capito,
Evan Mooney.
Well, I get Capito, but Joe Manchin supported leaving the Paris Accord.
He put out a statement that he supported it.
I didn't realize that.
So what's...
They all did.
Thanks, Joe.
McKinley. Yeah, they all just...
Yeah, Joe, by the way, also voted for all of Trump's appointments except for maybe 3.
Yes, he did. Yeah. So
Okay.
And we look at the funders between these guys. You know what? We don't have a Democratic candidate. We don't have a Republican candidate. We have a industry-fueled candidates.
Right.
They don't
We have
make,
Republicans and then slightly less Republicans.
they make decisions behind the scenes on who's paying them.
Right.
And
The big
how
quote,
are we going to have economic growth? I mean, we can have greener technologies and we can grow in West Virginia, but how can we grow if our leadership is not
Right.
supporting
You have to kind of
growth
establish
in other technologies?
Right. He's not setting a good tone for states. Right.
Well, there's a lot to say about this. I've actually done a fair amount of reporting about it. I mean, I talked to a woman from the National Resources Defense Council who was talking about the business case for staying in Paris. And she said 1,100 American companies with a capitalization, with revenues of $3 trillion signed on to stay in the Paris Accords because they saw it as economically the right decision. And there have been 3 million clean energy jobs created in this country. The clean energy sector is the fastest growing sector of employment in this country. Now the single fastest growing job title is wind turbine technician, repairman technician.
Right, maintenance, yeah.
Maintenance. And this is those companies didn't endorse the Paris Climate Agreement because it was, quote unquote, a bad deal where these foreign countries were taking advantage of us. We've already turned that corner. And this is why you have, half of Donald Trump's cabinet, half of his family, telling him that he should have stayed in the agreement. And I agree with there was a commentator on, I think it was on NPR, who said that, this wasn't industry versus consumers. This wasn't environmentalists versus, polluters. This was two sections of the economy, the economy that represents, there's twice as many people working in solar now as there are people working in coal mines. But it's, it's a division within the American economy, and the Trump administration is listening to, they're sort of beholden and captured by the people who, really supported them, who are tied to the old fossil fuels industries. So, I mean, it's...
Well, that's who all was there when he made the announcement in the Rose Garden.
Right.
I mean, he was talking about how unfair it was to workers.
Scott Pruitt.
But he had petroleum representatives, oil executives, fossil fuel people. They were all... I mean, this is not about the workers.
Right.
Trump's going to say that. This is not about the workers. If this was about the workers, like you said, he would support wind turbines because that's where more jobs are right now.
More jobs are.
That's where, if he cared about workers, he'd go to the industry where more workers are, right? That's what he would support.
Well, I wonder whether it's Trump being malign or, being intentionally malicious. I mean, there's a certain amount of him that's just vindictive.
I can't tell anymore half the time when he's just being dumb or when he's just being purposefully misleading.
Yeah,
well, it's hard to say.
It is hard to say.
It's hard. It's hard
I think
all the time. I can't tell which one
he has said
anymore.
for years that solar doesn't work because it's too expensive, right? That the problem with solar is that it costs too much. Well, it doesn't cost too much.
That was true maybe 10 years ago.
It was
or 15 years ago.
5 or 10 years ago. It's dropped precipitously.
And it will continue to do that. That's what technology does. It gets cheaper.
It's getting to the point now where if you're in Charleston and you join the solar co-op here, you can actually put solar panels on your house, and depending on the financing, the cost that you would pay in terms of paying your loan off and paying your down payment is going to be less than your electric bill.
Right. And sometimes you will get checks if you have it worked out.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on the situation, but
right. And it doesn't always work out for everybody. But it's getting to the point where
it's competitive.
Right.
In other words, and Trump just, I don't know whether he's intentionally misleading or just hasn't kept up with the information, just out of date. But that's the thing about this Paris Climate Accord. I mean, he said that he represents the people of Pittsburgh, not the people of Paris. Well, the people of Pittsburgh voted 80% for Hillary Clinton, and they are strongly supportive of a clean energy economy. I grew up in Pittsburgh, and it's not that when I was growing up, I used to hear from guys who would talk about how if you were an office worker, you took 2 shirts. You wore one and you took one to change into it at lunchtime because your shirt would become gray and smudged with smog.
Right. Also, it's not, he says he doesn't represent the people of Paris. The Paris Climate Accord is not just for the people of Paris.
Yeah.
I don't know if he knows that, but saying his reason for pulling out is because he's not supposed to represent the people of Paris is like ridiculous. It's for the whole planet,
this instinctive,
including us.
I mean, and this is kind of what is so confusing about Trump. Or not confusing, but there's a level of sort of cut off your nose to spite your face. And I don't think that the U.S. was getting a bad deal out of the Paris climate accord,
right?
Because we were supplying some money to the third world, but we already have our economy developed. We can afford it, and we weren't. It wasn't that the fear has been in West Virginia, and Trump alluded to this, is that if we reduce the amount of fossil fuels that we burn, then China and India are going to increase their fossil fuels, and he said that they're just going to take the coal mining jobs from Appalachia and Wyoming and move them to China. Well, that's not true anymore.
China signed on to the Paris Agreement.
And they have gone through a revolution. Their actual, the amount of carbon that they produce is actually declining. The amount of coal that they use is actually declining. They're shuttering hundreds and hundreds of coal-fired power plants and boilers in China, in part because they need to clean up their air. I mean, one of the things that they're facing is, and this is the kind of thing Paula's talking about, is that the studies, epidemiological studies that have shown that coal mining is bad for the health of the people that live near the surface mines, due to the tiny microparticles of dust that get into.
So now we've handed
lungs.
that leadership role over to them, basically.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is that Trump is he works on outdated information, and there's a level of just intentional malice that this is something that Obama did, and so therefore I'm going to smack the liberals. Right. That's what is.
I think that's at the core of a lot of things.
It really is.
That's what it's looking like.
Well, like signing off on the streamlined protection rule. You know, why can't we have water protection, and why can't we do coal mining? Why can't the coal industry mine responsibly? If that's their economic source, why do we have to kill each other to do it?
Right.
Because the Democrats wanted it this way, so we're going to do it this way, and that's all that matters. But it's Team Red versus Team Blue to them. That's all it is.
And this is not a game. People are dying. People are actually dying.
Yeah.
All right, guys, we got to move on to one more thing here, and then we will.
We've only got 4 minutes left.
Yeah, it kind of flew by.
It goes fast.
So Hillary Clinton was out speaking, and she keeps doing this, and I don't know what she's doing. I think she's probably going to run again, to be honest with you. But she's out there. She wrote a book, and she's out there giving these controlled media speeches with, different people that, to me, I don't really know a lot about who these people are there interviewing her. But so she gave one just the other day, and she was put on the spot a little bit about her Goldman Sachs speeches, and I wanted to listen to that a little bit with you all and talk about it. Then we'll have to end the show. So let's listen to this.
Or you thought you might, or probably you were thinking about it. You had to be thinking about it as a possibility. Why did you do those? I don't.
Why do you have Goldman Sachs here? Because they pay us. They paid me.
So because I did something bad, I'll just point to someone else and say you did it. So 2 wrongs make a right. That's the logic of an adult. Anyway.
But there's
this is.
And everyone laughs. Everyone laughs because it's really cute. But here we go.
Again, I have.
Let's get serious. I know they paid you, but
yes.
And they paid you a lot.
Yes.
But you didn't. You're not somebody who needed that money for the next week's shopping, and you knew you might have run. So why do it?
Well, I
Anderson
gave
Cooper?
speeches to many, many groups. I spoke to camp counselors. I spoke to healthcare executives. I spoke to, just a wide range of
Right.
groups, right? And not just in the United States, but particularly in Canada and a few other places. And I was a senator from New York. I knew these people, and I knew what they did for the economy, and I knew what they did to the economy. And I think that, speaking to them, raising questions, which I did in 2008 and 2009.
Then release the transcripts of the conversations. If she was so hard on him and took such a great balanced stance and was so I know what you did and I know who you are.
I don't care.
Well,
I don't care. I don't care who she talks to. I mean, first of all, I doubt that she's going to run. She's going to be probably too old to run again in 2020. But even so, and this is why I don't think Biden's going to run. But it's, I really don't care. This is such a small thing compared to, for example, pulling out of the Paris Agreement, or not supporting clean water, the stream buffer rule, or the waters of the U.S. rule.
I don't know. Having conversations with people that wrecked the economy and cost so many people their savings and cost so many people their livelihoods, and not releasing the transcripts, that mattered to me. That still matters to me. And she's talking. She's still doing the same thing she did during the campaign that lost her the election.
It doesn't matter to me.
What do you think, Paula? Does this matter to you?
It matters to me if she's going to run again. It matters to me and to people that having to deal with issues in her region. But yeah, I think she's just part of the same.
Do you care if a Democrat takes a bunch of money from Goldman Sachs? Does that?
Yeah, I care about any Democrat or
bothers me.
Republican taking any kind of money like that, because that's like I said before, it's contributing to our demise. They're bought and paid for.
Any
Democrat
who takes money from Goldman Sachs and still supports not repealing Dodd-Frank, which is what the Trump administration is looking at, which is a serious set of regulations on the banking sector. I mean, that's much more important than whether or not she made a bunch of money in an afternoon. I don't, if I had the opportunity to make $100,000 talking to bankers, you think I'd turn that down?
Well, she's supposed to be a public servant, though. She shouldn't be bought and paid for. I mean, yeah,
right. I mean, you're not running for president.
Right. And if she is a politician, we need to work on rules about taking money like this, because special interest, or she's supposed to be people interested, and she's supposed to be a public servant.
All righty, guys. Well, I gotta end the show here. Well, actually, no. Let's go. We can squeeze in the Trump tweet of the week, aka the Tiny Finger Bully Report. Do you notice we are not having a gun debate right now? That's because they used knives and a truck.
That's the Trump tweet of the week.
He actually,
he's watching the Kavifi.
Right.
He's making sure that he's got
I wondered
Kavifi.
how you pronounce that.
The AP came out and said it's Kavifi. Kavifi.
Right.
Kavifi.
Okay. So I want to thank everyone for coming on. Dan Hyman, thank you for being here.
Hey, you bet.
Paula Jean, thanks for coming on. Hopefully,
tweet us at Mountain State Up. You can tweet me at PNS_WV.
All right. And we'll be back next week. Paula Jean, thanks for coming on again. Make sure that, after this is all said and done, maybe we'll have you back on and talk about it. So, okay, cool deal. All right, we'll be back next week, Sunday at noon, right here on WTSQ 88.1 LP in Charleston. I'm John Canties. Now let's go ahead and listen to some rockabilly right here on WTSQ.
Rockabilly and radio. Rockabilly and blues radio.